In today's episode, we turn to societies where trust is not a fragile ideal, but a working assumption of everyday life. Countries where people routinely trust strangers, institutions, and even politicians, and where that trust shapes how politics, welfare, and economy function. My guest today is Gert Tinggaard Svendsen. He spent decades studying why countries like Denmark consistently rank among the world's high-trust societies. In his work and in his recent book, he challenges a comforting myth that trust is simply cultural or somehow in the DNA of a nation. Instead, he shows how trust is built or undermined by institutions, incentives, and the everyday experience of fairness and predictability. Using that lens, we'll explore what sustains political trust in Denmark, how it compares to the Netherlands, and where even high-trust societies may be more vulnerable than they realize, especially under pressure from polarization, migration, and growing demands for control. My name is Severin de Wit. I'm your host today. Gert, welcome to TrustTalk. You are from Denmark. Denmark consistently ranks among the highest trust societies in the world, particularly when it comes to trust in politicians and public institutions. From your perspective, what is the single most important reason for that?
That's a good question. And so the first thing we probably need to do now is to define trust. And the way I define trust is as the likelihood of being cheated. So it's a risk assessment. When trust is high, then it means that the risk of being cheated is low. And that's a cool thing, and that makes society nice, you might say, comfortable life. I think one single important reason for this high level of trust that you find in Denmark and the other Nordic countries would be the low level of corruption. Corruption can be defined as the misuse of public position. And that's a way of cheating, because then some people will be above the law and people will not in general be equal to the law. There will not be this arm's length principle. And that's cheating, because everybody should respect the law when it's the rule of law that prevails. And therefore I think that absence of high corruption is the reason for the high trust society of Denmark. That would be a main reason.
We come to talk about corruption in a little bit. When people talk about trust, they often assume it's cultural or even in the DNA of a country. Based on your research, how much of Denmark's political trust is actually built rather than inherited?
I would say that it would be to a large degree be inherited due to some lucky circumstances in history. One main reason I think that we have this high level of trust today and low corruption is that social control is very, very strong. So it means that if somebody is cheating, it will also be a bureaucrat or a politician, there'll be an immediate, strong social reaction from the public. And this has a very deep foundation in the history of Denmark, which is summarized in a few lines here, would be characterized by a lot of physical meeting places. So I think just like in the Netherlands, Denmark is a trading country, and free trade and so on has been dominating throughout history. But very early on in Danish history, you have a lot of trade going on, especially in Viking Age, you have a lot of trade. And we have a king called Harald Bluetooth who actually makes safe trading centers in Denmark, especially Heidebo in the southern part of Denmark and the present day Slesvig in Germany. And here you have a lot of trade going on, and people could basically not read and write. They were analphabets. So it's basically a verbal culture. And the only thing you had was control, social control. So if somebody cheats you in this trading center and sells you a fake sword or a fake silk dress or whatever it is, well, then there'll be consequences socially, and you'll be ostracized socially if you don't behave right, and you have to find another place to trade or give the money back. And it's very hard. You get a bad reputation. And it's actually a very, very efficient way of training people to behave in a trustworthy way and be honest.
If we compare Denmark and the Netherlands, specifically on trust in politicians, where do you see the strongest similarities and where do they differ? Is there something Denmark does institutionally or politically that the Netherlands does less well, or vice versa?
I think that there are many similarities. The Netherlands are also relatively high in trust levels and not far away from the Nordic countries. And we have much in common also in history, trade, etc., as we just talked about. And basically, we are both high trust societies with moral values, and it's not okay to lie and cheat and so on. But perhaps Denmark today has a stronger consensus culture compared to the Netherlands, because the idea of having a dialogue between parties is very, very strong. So it means that you try to compromise, and also extreme parties will also be involved typically, and they will try to talk and what can we do together so we both win from this cooperation. And actually, I'm a guest professor in Germany at Kiel University this semester, and here I also observe German politics, and here they have built a firewall against the extreme right party. And in Denmark, I think people probably try to talk. Seen from the outside, perhaps the Netherlands today is a bit more polarized, especially around the immigration policy. And that would be one main difference, I guess.
Both countries rely heavily on coalition governments and compromise. Do you think consensus politics actively produces trust, or does high trust make consensus politics possible in the first place?
I would say that high trust facilitates consensus because it's based on experience. So when you assess the risk of being cheated, you say and count how many pluses do I have, how many successful cooperations do I have from I was born up till now, and how many minuses also in politics. So I would say that based on your previous experiences, then you assess that we can compromise and cooperate due to this statistic we carry around, and I would call it the rucksack statistics, because we put our pluses and minuses in our rucksack. So that's kind of a trust rucksack in this way. Just like when you bike somewhere, and I think in the Netherlands you bike a lot, it's also based on a risk assessment, because if you were attacked every time you were biking to work or to university, school, wherever, then you have to change the statistics here, get more minuses, and then it no longer pays to bike. And the same way I would say about the politics.
In countries like ours, social trust is often credited to what they call tight-knit communities. But Denmark and the Netherlands are also diverse, modern societies. So what keeps social trust strong even as populations change?
And here I would again say social control is crucial. If somebody don't behave right, here I have developed some game theory, and I talk about different player types in a society. And most people in the Netherlands and Denmark, luckily, they are what I call hard riders. So hard riders are the trustworthy ones. They would like to cooperate and would like to contribute and like to get a job and pay taxes, etc. They're good people, very good for society. And the problem arises if you have an easy rider, I call it. So an easy rider is one that can cheat and is not trustworthy. If an easy rider is around, it's just like standing in a line somewhere, and you have all the hard riders, they wait. And the norm here, the rule is that if a new one arrives, you go into the back of the line. But sometimes, a new one goes up in front of the line. And that's not so good. That's an easy rider. And then all the hard riders, they look at each other. Who should go and talk to this person, explain where the line starts? And normally, often, one of them will then take the extra effort to go up and just tell where the line starts. And then this hard rider will turn into a tough rider, I call it. So a tough rider is one who handles socially an easy rider and train the easy rider to behave right. Or it could also be a misunderstanding. It's somebody who doesn't understand the rules, and you have to explain it in a pedagogical way. And therefore, it's very important that these tough riders are around, that we just don't look at things and let things pass without any consequence. No, it's very important that we stick to trust, because you trust that other people behave right. In this case, go up start back in the line. And I think that's a crucial thing to understand what keeps social trust strong and how to transfer the norms, also to other people and to the new generations.
In many countries, political trust rises and falls with personalities. In Denmark, trust seems more resilient. Is that because citizens trust the system more than individual politicians?
I would say that as a trust creates resilience. That would be my take on this. Because, again, it's the statistics in your trust rucksack. So when you have a lot of pluses compared to only a few minuses, then it takes a lot of time to change the statistics. You need several minuses in your rucksack before you have more minuses than pluses. And therefore, I would say that that's the reason for resilience in Denmark rather than personalities. So again, it's due to this historical path where we for centuries have been trained to behave in a specific way.
On the Trust Society website, you emphasize low corruption. You just mentioned in the beginning of our conversation the word corruption, and strong institutions. How critical is corruption control for sustaining trust in politics?
It's absolutely critical, because what's crucial here is that the politicians should serve the people rather than their own interests in an illegal way. If they are corrupt, if they steal money or receive bribes, that's very, very bad for trust. Therefore, it's very important that you fight the corruption in a country and try to approach, the German sociologist Max Weber. He talks a lot about politicians and bureaucrats being the servants for the citizens in society. And this is crucial not only for trust, also for the overall economy in the country, because when you have corruption, money ends up in the wrong pockets, and society is no longer fair and meritocratic. And that's very important for trust in society, that everybody feels that this is a fair system. And you can make a career if you like, you can climb the ladder. Everybody gets the chance, and without hitting a glass ceiling, when you climb the ladder, all of a sudden you cannot get any further because the elite will then have access to all the positions above this glass ceiling and so on. But it's very important that the best people are appointed, gets the job, and that's true meritocracy. That would be crucial.
Both Denmark and the Netherlands have extensive welfare states. In your research, how tightly are welfare institutions and political trust connected?
Strongly connected. So you have to trust that the politicians will invest the taxpayers' money in an optimal way so they get, you might call, bang for the buck. They have to deliver the goods, and so the citizens should feel that they get more back than what they pay, so that we get this win-win situation between politicians and the citizens and the taxpayers. So it's very important that the politicians here are trustworthy, that they give the voters what they promised during the election campaign, and also that politicians at the same time also make sure that all the people that are capable of doing so, all the hard riders, that they work and pay taxes, and it pays to do so. And in this way, you can establish this astonishing welfare state system where you have, you might call it a collective insurance system, where you actually distribute money from, you might say, the lucky hard riders to the more unlucky people that for some reason cannot no longer work or are ill or, whatever happens. And that's quite astonishing.
Yeah. Is there a risk that tightening control mechanisms, even with good intentions, can slowly erode trust in politicians and public institutions?
Yes. So if you have too tight control mechanism, what I would call over-control, then actually what you do here is that you treat hard riders, people that you actually can trust, you treat them as if they were easy riders, people you cannot trust, people that will cheat. And that's not nice. A lot of people have tried to face distrust, even though you can be trusted. And it's kind of a signal that the people that distrust you, they will not cooperate with you based on trust. And that gives you a bad mood, and it also is very costly to control people. And you could actually save a lot of control costs because there's no reason to control people that you can trust, the hard riders. So I think that will erode trust because, as I write in my little book Trust, 100% control would be the same as 0% trust. Then you no longer need trust if everything is fully controlled. So what it's about is to find the optimal mix between control and trust and make sure that you don't over-control.
Even high-trust societies face pressure. What do you see as the biggest long-term risks to political trust in Denmark today?
Today, I would say that what we see is more and more power centralization and more bureaucratization. So you have more and more rules and more top-down. And that's very, very dangerous that we in this way slowly have started moving from a high-trust society to a control society. What is crucial here and very important to keep on doing is to make sure that you have local self-regulation and you have decentralized power systems where, in this way, stimulate the civic society at the local level all over Denmark. And I think the same would be the case in the Netherlands, so that everybody feels that they are part of this project and we can work together.
I wanted to talk about some of risks that also are in the Netherlands to be seen. For example, polarization, media dynamics, and declining party loyalty. How much influence do they have on trust level?
So seen from the outside, it seems that it's more polarization and populism in the Netherlands compared to Denmark today. And a big discussion in Denmark also, exactly to prevent these problems, is to make sure that voters are well informed. And that means that the media here will play a very strong role. It's very important that they do constructive news, so they don't just write about conflicts and problems, but actually try to solve the problems and what can we do better tomorrow, rather than talking about all the accidents and catastrophes yesterday and focus on conflicts only. I would call it constructive journalism. That would be a key concept for future media coverage, and I think crucial also in the fight against polarization and populism.
Once political trust starts to decline, how hard is it to rebuild? Are high-trust societies more resilient or more vulnerable because they take trust for granted?
Exactly, and that's a big danger. Don't take trust for granted. It can disappear just like sand slipping through your fingers. You have to work hard to maintain and rebuild trust and stay in shape, just like a football team or a handball team. So if the Dutch have just won the World Championship in football, I mean, it's no good.
I wish we were, yeah.
Let's hope so. Say you win next time, and you're very good at football. Say you win next time, and I mean, then you cannot just go and sleep on the couch after winning. The players have to stay in shape, and the same thing with trust. You have to stay in shape. And in my terminology here, the hard riders, they have to be alert and ready to turn into tough riders when problems arise to make the system work and continue. So yeah, and a big threat, as you said here, is that you get too comfortable and take things for granted, because then you're no longer aware of what happens when it's disappearing, for example, moving from trust society to control society.
You touched upon it slightly, but I'd like to go a little deeper. What pressures do migration, digital polarization, and declining face-to-face interaction pose to Denmark's high levels of social trust?
Yeah, these are strong challenges. Besides the risk of this control society and potential corruption problems, it's very important that immigrants are integrated. It might take some time, but it's very important that they get a job and learn the language so they can become a part of society and do not live in parallel societies. And just do something. For example, in Denmark, it doesn't matter what you do, what kind of work you have, just as long as you do something and contribute somehow. It can also be as a volunteer, but everybody will be respected if you do something when they're capable of doing so. And then I will say that polarization here and these declining face-to-face interactions are it's a very, very important point. So it's very important that we keep on meeting physically face-to-face interaction in meeting places all over Holland or Denmark, so that you meet and confirm that this is a good behavior. And then you also trained if you don't behave right, and you can cooperate and talk together. And can I sell something to you? Can I sell a bike to you? I have used bike for you, and you would like to try it. And okay, we make a deal, and I sell it to you, and we have a win-win situation. You'd rather have the bike than the money. I'd rather have the money than the bike. We both win, win-win. And in this way, you get pluses in your rucksack, and that's a very efficient way of maintaining and perhaps even increasing trust.
Yeah. I want to move on a little bit to the economics of trust. You often describe trust as an economic asset that reduces transaction costs. Could you give an example of how high social trust boosts economic performance in Denmark?
Yeah. What do you do in your leisure time?
I golf.
Yes. What can you sell in a golf club?
Well, you golf. If you don't play golf anymore, you can sell your golf clubs, for example.
Yeah, say that you have too many golf clubs and you sell one of these, a good one, to one of your friends or another person in the golf club. And this person would like to try the golf club first. And then if he likes it, he will send you the money. And that's what normally happens. You don't need a lawyer. You don't need thick written contracts. You save a lot of time. It's just a handshake. A word is a word. And that's all. And that's very cheap and very fast and very flexible way of doing deals in everyday life. And now I can say that you sell 100 golf clubs, and number 100, here the person in the golf club forgets to pay. And now you're the hard rider, and the other one is the easy rider that actually cheats you to try to steal your golf club. And again, then you talk to this person and ask about if he likes the golf club, and you haven't got the money yet. And if it doesn't pay you, you can tell the other people in the golf club what happened. And that's would not, it's no longer nice for this person to play golf in this club, and he'll have to pay you eventually. So again, social control. So I think that this is very important for low transaction costs. It's cheap. And I have actually rewritten the famous words of Lenin. Lenin once said that, trust is good, but control is better. And I have rewritten this phrase to control is good, but trust is cheaper. So it's just, you save money. It's good business. There are so many examples of this. Also in Denmark, you have directors in companies saying that, for example, my younger brother interviewed a director in a machine factory here in Jutland, and he asked his machine factory director, do you use a lot of paper, contracts, when you do business? And the director then said, no, this is a machine factory, it's not a paper factory.
Okay, I have two more questions for you before we have to conclude. One is the lessons across borders. If Dutch policymakers asked you what they should protect at all cost to preserve political trust, what would you tell them?
I would tell them to minimize corruption and talk as much as possible. Stick to the roots of Dutch politics, which is a very, very strong consensus culture, just like in Denmark, and have this dialogue going on. Normally, if you meet and talk, you'll find some way where both parties can gain, and you have this win-win situation, rather than trying to have situations where one party might win, but the other party will lose. That's not good cooperation. Good cooperation is when both parties win from a deal. Try to see if deals can be made to the benefit of the overall Dutch society.
Yeah. My last question, for listeners outside Denmark and the Netherlands, what is the biggest misunderstanding about how political trust actually works in high trust societies?
I think the biggest misunderstanding is that often you say that more control is necessary. So when you have a problem, you think, okay, then we just introduce more control. And that might not be the case. It could be that you have a problem, there might be a nurse that made a mistake or something, a home assistant making a mistake. And then it's very important that you don't start controlling all the home assistants, what they call home care assistants, because that's very, very costly. And it could be that this single home care assistant just needs a talk. It's actually an involuntary easy rider. And you just need to explain more fully how things work and what's expected. And then this easy rider will then turn into involuntary easy rider, will then turn into a hard rider, and the problem is solved. So here it's very dangerous that if politicians just say, okay, we have a problem. Oh, yeah, we have to introduce more control, and now we've done something, and that's very costly, and eventually it can destroy our competitiveness. And also, again, it's not nice to be looked over the shoulder all the time when you're at work. It gives you a bad mood.
Yeah, to say the least. Gert, good to have you on the show. Thanks, and wishing you good fortune with your future research.
Thank you, and thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to TrustTalk. Trust is easy to praise, much harder to understand. That's what these conversations are for. Hope to see you back for the next conversation.